New York, World Trade Center Tower number 1 was weakening. It had stood for an hour and 43 minutes. But at 10:29 a.m., it buckled in a mirror image of the collapse of its twin. The picture that went round the world reached the First Lady in a secure location somewhere in Washington.
I was very worried, like everybody in America was, about what was going on in New York. So we watched the buildings fall, and, you know, it was just an unbelievable sight.
This was a moment when disaster turned to catastrophe. What did you think when those buildings were coming down?
I was horrified. I thought, dear God, please protect as many citizens as you can. It was a nightmare.
By 10:30, America's largest city was devastated. Its military headquarters was burning. And Air Force One turned west along the Gulf Coast.
I can remember sitting right here in this office, thinking about the consequences of what had taken place, and realizing it was a defining moment in the history of the United States. And I didn't need any legal briefs, I didn't need any consultations, I knew we were at war.
This TLC program is sponsored in part by Kodak Max HQ One-Time Use Flash Camera.
Now you can get great pictures from a one-time use camera. The Kodak Max HQ. It's the only camera of its kind with an Ectonar lens. So you get the sharpest pictures of any one-time use camera. Because great pictures can make a special day even better.
Hey, what's this? Share the moment, share life.
Thrifty.com. Great cars, great rates, 24/7.
Don't tell me you put that in.
Yeah.
I gotta see this.
How sure are you about your wiring skills? Come into Ace. We'll show you how to get the job done right.
Ace, the helpful place.
As you can see, the terms are good, the rate is low.
Okay, then. Thanks anyway. Next.
Want banks to compete over you? At LendingTree.com, fill out one simple form and get up to 4 offers. When banks compete, you win at LendingTree.
Trading Spaces goes southwest for a cattle country cleanup. But will Doug's team lift his bedroom blues?
What is a Doug color?
And can Lori clear the kid clutter and create a hip home office?
I like modern.
Then two sisters make a 2-day exchange for change.
All right, bye.
But will Vern's design have them seeing red?
Thank you, officer.
And can Ty get things back under control? It's back-to-back decorating dilemmas on Trading Spaces. It all starts Saturday at 8 on TLC.
Welcome to Full Metal Challenge.
It's the ultimate hot rod rodeo.
Challengers, start your engines. From the shores of Wetropolis to the halls of Tenpin, 3 teams from around the world will answer the call to slug it out in 4 insanely fiendish events. Crank it up as this week's contenders put the pedal to the metal, fire up those homemade cars, and fight to the automotive death. Full Metal Challenge, Sunday and Wednesday at 10, only on TLC.
For President George W. Bush, the first hours after the attack on September 11th appear to have been frustrating. On board Air Force One, he watched the horrifying pictures, but the TV signal was breaking up. His calls to the vice president were cutting out. Mr. Bush says he pounded his desk, shouting, "This is inexcusable. Get me the vice president."
I was trying to clear the fog of war, and there is a fog of war. Information was just flying from all directions.
How did you separate fact from fiction in the first 30 minutes or an hour? You were hearing everything.
Well, you can't separate fact from fiction. My first job was really to gather as much information as I could and speak to the American people.
Unable to address the nation at that moment, Mr. Bush was able to speak to his mother and father, the former president.
And I got him on the phone, and I said, "Where are you?" He said, "We're in a motel on the outskirts of Milwaukee." I said, "What are you doing there?" And they said, "You grounded our airplane." I said, "How you doing?" They said, "Fine, but more importantly, how are you doing?" And I said, "I feel strong, resolved, don't worry about me. And don't worry about the country. We'll be fine."
But the reports coming into the president's office were alarming. Chief of Staff Card brought word that Camp David had been hit. A jet was thought to be targeting Mr. Bush's ranch.
I remember hearing that the State Department might have been hit, or that the White House had a fire in it, so we were hearing lots of different information.
You feared all of that was true?
At the time I did.
They also feared that Air Force One itself was a target. Vice President Cheney told the president there was a credible threat against the plane. Using the code name for Air Force One, Mr. Bush told an aide, "Angel is next." The threat was passed to presidential pilot Colonel Mark Tillman.
It was serious before that, but now it is no longer is it a time to get the president home. We actually have to consider everything we say, everything we do could be intercepted, and we have to make sure that no one knows what our position is.
Tillman asked for an armed guard at his cockpit door while Secret Service agents double-checked the identity of everyone on board. The crew reviewed the emergency evacuation plan, and then came warning from air traffic control. A suspect airliner was dead ahead.
Coming out of Sarasota, there was one call that said there was an airliner off our nose that they did not have contact with.
Tillman took evasive action, pulling his plane high above normal traffic. They were on course for Washington, but by now no one thought that was a good idea, except the president.
I wanted to come back to Washington. I thought it was very important for me to be in the center of our government, in charge of the situation. I knew I could be in charge of the situation on Air Force One via the telephone, but I wanted to be there in the Capitol. But I was, it was impossible for me to go back. We didn't know what was going on. The Secret Service felt like my life was at risk. And I have an obligation to our country to make sure our government functions.
So Air Force One set course for an underground command center in Nebraska. Back in Washington, the president's closest advisor, Karen Hughes, heard about the threat to the plane and called Mr. Bush.
And the military operator came back to me and in a voice that to me sounded very shaken said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, we can't reach Air Force One."
Hughes was out of the White House during the attacks. When she came back, it was a place she didn't recognize.
Move everybody across the street. Use the light, please.
They were either military or maybe Secret Service, dressed all in black, holding machine guns as we drove up. And I never expected to see something like that in our nation's capital.
And when you entered the White House?
There was no one in sight. And I knew it was a day that you didn't want to surprise anybody. So I yelled, hello. And 2 SWAT team members came running through the hall with, again, guns drawn, and then took me to the location where I met the Vice President.
Back on Air Force One, Colonel Tillman had a problem. Although his aircraft was off the ground,
It was a lot safer to be airborne at that point.
he still needed to hide the most visible plane in the world, a 747 longer than the White House itself.
We had the president on board, so we assumed that the president may be a part of this plot.
Tillman didn't want to use his radio, fearing that the hijackers were listening to regular air traffic channels. So he called air traffic control on the telephone.
We actually didn't tell them our destination or what directions we were heading. We basically just talked to them and said, okay, fine. We have no clearance at this time. We are just going to fly across the United States.
Controllers passed Air Force One from one sector to another, warning each other to keep the route secret.
Okay, where's he going? Just watch him. Don't question about where he's going. Just work him and watch him. And there's no flight plan in right now. We're not going to put anything in. Okay, sir? Copy that. Thank you. Yeah.
Air Force One was now flying virtually solo in the empty skies with no flight plan.
Air Force One, go ahead. I think the Air Force aircraft are working right now in our area.
Still, feeling vulnerable, Tillman asked for a fighter escort.
At that point, we realized that we probably needed some kind of long-range capability, either AWACS or some kind of fighter support to protect us long range, identify targets for us, and tell us whether they're friend or foe.
Two fighter pilots had scrambled to their jets, unaware that they were flying one of the most important missions of their lives.
Air Force One got 2 F-16s at about your 10 o'clock position.
The staff and the president and us were filed out along the outside hallway of his presidential cabin there and looking out the windows. And the president gives them the signal of salute, and the pilot kind of tips his wing and fades off and backs into formation.
Back in the press seats, CBS News photographer George Christian grabbed his camera and captured the moment.
There was a fighter jet so close that it appeared to be within the wing space of Air Force One. It was an incredible picture. That was probably, I guess, the most poignant picture to show that there was truly a moment where the president was in danger and we all were in danger.
The men in the F-16s were Shane Brotherton and Randy Roberts from the Texas Air National Guard. Their mission was so secret, their commander wouldn't tell them where they were headed.
He just said, "You'll know when you see it." And that was my first clue. I didn't have any idea what we were doing.
My wing commander was at the command center, and he came up on a secure radio and told me that you're going to go out and intercept one of our own.
One of your own, meaning the president?
Yes, sir. President Bush was part of the 147th Fighter Wing and flew F-102s.
Brotherton and Roberts rode shotgun for the president all day long.
We were trying to keep an 80-mile bubble around Air Force One, and we'd investigate anything that was within 80 miles.
Were you worried about the safety of the people on this aircraft in those moments?
No.
Your own safety?
No, I wasn't worried about it. I looked out the airplane and saw 2 F-16 on each wing. There's going to have to be a pretty good pilot to get us.
The threat to Air Force One turned out to be a false alarm, but it had a powerful effect at the time. Many in the public were wondering, with the president out of sight, was he still running the government? He hadn't appeared after the attack on Washington. His failure to appear also bothered Mr. Bush. At one point, he was overheard saying, quote, "The American people want to know where their dang president is."
We knew that the president was going to have to address the nation somewhere, somehow.
The staff considered an address to the nation by phone, but instead Mr. Bush ordered Air Force One to land somewhere within 30 minutes so he could appear on TV. Moments later, the 2 F-16 pilots dove away from the president's plane to clear the airspace around their chosen destination.
There was a crop duster flying around north of Barksdale Air Force Base, and we went down there and investigated.
Must have been one startled crop duster.
For sure.
At 11:45, Air Force One landed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
Hustled off the airplane, went into the commanding general's office, and the president continued to get information from there. He spoke with Governor Pataki, Mayor Giuliani. He spoke with Senator Schumer and told them that all the resources of the government would be available to help New Yorkers. And then he addressed the nation for the second time that day.
The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
Once his brief speech was over, the president headed back to Air Force One. But anxiety over Mr. Bush's security while on the ground led the Secret Service to improvise and use some of the military assets at hand.
I'll never forget when we left Barksdale Air Force Base, the president left in what's called a camouflage up-armored Humvee. Armored vehicle, had a machine gun turret in the top, no machine gun present in it, but the turret is there. And as we drove on the tarmac to Air Force One, there are Air Force security police with their automatic weapons out, guard dogs all over the place, facing out into the woods, looking at the fence line. It's just a scene you don't imagine in the United States.
The president's staff believed the situation in Washington was still unsafe, so they decided to continue to Nebraska, to a central command center where Mr. Bush could be secure and have all the communications gear he needed to run the government. Once aboard Air Force One, Mr. Bush had a job for Press Secretary Fleischer.
The president asked me to make sure that I took down everything that was said. I think he wanted to make certain that a record existed.
Fleischer's notes capture Mr. Bush's language plain and unguarded. To the vice president, he said, quote, "We're at war, Dick. We're going to find out who did this and kick their ass."
Anybody who dares attack us is going to pay a price. That's how I felt.
Mr. Bush had much the same message for Defense Secretary Rumsfeld.
And I can remember telling the Secretary of Defense, I said, we're going to find out who did this. And then, Mr. Secretary, you and Dick Myers, who we had just named as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, are going to go get him.
As morning turned to afternoon, the president began to create a new doctrine aboard the airborne White House. When he next touched down, he would lay out the path to war.
From generation to generation, some things never change. At New York Life, it's our values. Financial strength, integrity, and humanity. Values rooted in our tradition as a mutual company serving only the interests of our customers. Values that make New York Life the company you keep.
Introducing Tampax Pearl, the extraordinary new tampon that's superior to the plastic most of you use today. That's because Tampax Pearl has a smooth plastic applicator for more comfort, a totally new shape that expands widthwise to fit your unique form, even an absorbent braid for better protection. So break out of the ordinary. Tampax Pearl, as extraordinary as you are.
My car's like a rocket, except closer to the ground.
I like being in my car. In my truck, I feel awesome.
Well, it's the only time I get the love from the ladies.
Stereo up, 2 windows down.
Hop in, no maps.
Just checking everything out. I'm flying.
Like I can go anywhere.
I'm going to Broadway, baby.
I'm going to Omaha.
Texas, I'm gonna get barbecue.
Mardi Gras, New Orleans. Miami.
Miami.
Bozeman, Montana.
Cleveland.
I'm gonna find my mojo.
I'm going to drive to New York and buy shoes.
When I'm driving my car, I feel like I'm saving a little bit of Mother Earth.
I feel like a wolf.
Speed racer chick.
A roaring tiger.
I'm super fly.
I'm the DJ. Don't touch my stereo and don't lower my bass.
Drive one of Toyota's 18 different trucks, cars, and SUVs.
When I'm in my car, I look good.
And it feels like good things are coming your way.
When I'm in my car, I am sheer perfection.
Nothing brightens your children's holidays like these wonderful Christmas songs. Time Life Music presents 100 Christmas songs for kids on 4 CDs or cassettes for $24.99. Imagine owning all your favorite Christmas songs in one collection. You get fun songs and traditional songs of faith. Songs that inspire you. Songs that warm your heart. 100 Christmas songs for kids. If you're not completely satisfied, Time Life will refund every penny of your purchase price. 100 Christmas songs for kids is not sold in stores, so call now.
Call 1-800-353-8855 to order 100 Christmas songs for kids for just $24.99 plus shipping, or send check or money order to the address on your screen.
What do you like to do? With Discovery Home and Leisure Channel, you'll fix up your home, spice up your meals, stir up some fun. In the kitchen, the workshop, or the great outdoors, you can make it wild, mild, or styled. On Discovery Home and Leisure, it's all up to you. Our unique lineup of shows gives you the power. The new 24-hour network on digital cable and satellite. Call your cable or satellite provider now and ask for Discovery Home and Leisure Channel. What do you like to do?
On the next all-new Junkyard Wars. Yeah! It's a choo-choo challenge as the teams root through the rubbish to build railroad racers.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're going to let us go practice tonight, right?
But which team will have the one-track mind to steam ahead? And who will be derailed? Let the trains begin on an all-new Junkyard Wars, Wednesday at 9 on TLC.
Air Force One touched down at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. President George W. Bush and his team were herded into a small brick hut that gave no hint of what they would find below. 4 flights of stairs leading to an underground command center manned by a round-the-clock battle staff.
You feel like you're playing a part in a movie, actually. It really is. You see the looks on their faces, and not sure how often they see people from the outside, much less the President of the United States.
This is the U.S. Strategic Command Underground Command Center. It was built to transmit a president's order to go to nuclear war. When Mr. Bush walked in, the battle staff was watching the skies over the United States. After a short briefing, Mr. Bush and Chief of Staff Card were taken to a teleconference center for a meeting of his National Security Council back in Washington. Mr. Bush had a question for his CIA director, George Tenet.
George Tenet was asked, who do you think did this to us? He said, sir, I believe it's Al-Qaeda. We're doing the assessment, but it looks like, it feels like, it smells like Al-Qaeda.
FBI Director Robert Mueller says there was an essential clue that came from one of the hijacked planes before it crashed.
There was a flight attendant, Amy Sweeney, who had the presence of mind to call her office as the plane is hijacked and give them the seat numbers of the hijackers. What did that do for you?
That was the first piece of hard evidence. We could then go to the manifest, find out who was sitting in those seats, and immediately conduct an investigation of those individuals, as opposed to taking all of the passengers on the plane and going through a process of elimination.
During the teleconference with the National Security Council, the president's staff began making plans for an address to the nation from the bunker in Nebraska.
The President of the United States addressing the nation from a bunker in Nebraska. That must have seemed like a terrible image to you.
It was would not be our first priority. It's not the way that as a communicator that you would want to deliver the important message he had to the American people.
Mr. Bush wanted to deliver that message from the Oval Office. The Secret Service insisted that Washington still wasn't safe. But by then, Mr. Bush had had enough.
He looks at us and says, "Let's go. We're going back. We're going home."
At one point he said he didn't want a tin-horn terrorist keeping him out of Washington.
Come on, he really said, "I don't want a tin-horn terrorist to keep me out of Washington"?
That's verbatim.
I also wanted to get back to convene the national security team. We had convened them by video conference, and that's fine. But I wanted to see me and see my body language and feel what I felt, because I had something to tell them. And I wanted to make it absolutely clear that we're at war, that we were going to set new doctrine, and that we're going to win the war, and we were going to lead this country. And I couldn't wait to get back. I also wanted to see Laura.
At 4:36 that afternoon, he finally headed home.
I had time to think, and a couple of thoughts emerged. One was that you're guilty if you harbor a terrorist, because I knew these terrorists, like Al-Qaeda, like to prey on weak government and weak people. The other thought that came was the opportunity to fashion a vast coalition of countries that would either be with us or with the terrorists.
Even in those early hours on Air Force One, you were looking out on a world that was suddenly pretty black and white to you. You're either with us or against us.
That's right. I felt that way.
While the president's plane sped east, the last casualty of the attack on America collapsed. World Trade Center number 7. 47 stories turned to dust in the street. As one of the nation's most tragic days turned into evening, it was feared that as many as 10,000 people had died. The true death toll came months later. At the World Trade Center, 2,797 were killed. At the Pentagon, 184, and in Pennsylvania, 40. Altogether, there were 3,021 dead. But in the early evening of September 11th, as military jets patrolled the skies over New York and Washington, no one knew whether or where terror would strike next.
Hello, Moto.
The device, formerly known as a self-photo.
Command your phone. Search becomes intelligence. Silicon is if the computed F is greater than the value of F or 1, and K degrees of freedom exceeded with the probability. Hello, Moto.
World's only personalized razor with 9 adjustable comfort settings. New Norelco Spectrum. Set it for comfort.
What am I looking for? A lot of things, really. Athletic, good looking, a nice body wouldn't hurt. Stylish, for sure. And none of this taking it slow stuff.
The 250 horsepower Chrysler 300M with a race-inspired suspension and the most powerful V6 engine in its class. It has everything you're looking for.
I've always had a thing for power.
Now from Chrysler, our 7-year or 70,000-mile powertrain limited warranty, because love is a commitment.
How do you use your Sharpie, huh?
I use them for everything. Green we use for gardening. Blue we use for lunches.
Great,
oh,
thank you.
freezer bags. yeah, water wings. Arthur, you got a terrible spot here.
So, how do you use your Sharpie?
Don't you be shy.
Deck the hall with boughs of holly. Fa la 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 la.
Oh.
'Tis the season to be jolly. Fa la 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 la.
To deck the halls with strength that won't wreck the walls, you need the remarkable Command adhesive hooks from 3M. Simply stretch the tab and Command adhesive comes off clean. Because what goes up must come down. Take Command. Holds on strong, releases on command. From 3M.
Is there anything so heartwarming as a child opening up a gift? Discovery Channel Store has stuff for kids that leave the giver feeling as gifted as the child. Gifts you won't find anywhere else. Gifts that enchant children and enrich them too. Gifts so full of wonder that the gift can open up the child. There's nothing like the gift of discovery.
Trading Spaces goes southwest for a cattle country cleanup. But will Doug's team lift his bedroom blues?
What is a Doug color?
And can Lori clear the kid clutter and create a hip home office?
I like modern.
Then two sisters make a 2-day exchange for change.
All right, bye.
But will Vern's design have them seeing red?
Thank you, officer.
And can Ty get things back under control? It's back-to-back decorating dilemmas on Trading Spaces. It all starts Saturday at 8 on TLC. It seems like all fun and games, but a whole lot can happen while you're out.
Oh my goodness.
It's 2 days of covert creativity.
It's a madhouse.
As our design team delivers surprise renovations from boring to beautiful. You can catch the fun, prizes, and surprises on While You Were Out. It all starts right after Trading Spaces. Saturdays at 10, only on TLC.
As Air Force One flew home through the darkening skies of September 11th, Washington, D.C. was reeling from the attacks. Across the Potomac River from the Capitol, the Pentagon was still burning 8.5 hours after American Flight 77 disintegrated into its walls. Marine Major Damian Marsh, co-pilot of the President's helicopter, Marine One, was stationed nearby throughout the day.
There was little charred pieces of paper and smoke from the Pentagon landing in our facility, so we're right in the heart of it.
Travis Bowes is Marine One's crew chief.
It was my job to just make sure that that plane was ready to go all day long.
Bowes and Marsh were waiting for the president when he stepped off Air Force One at 6:30.
From the time the president stepped off Air Force One and came down the steps and started walking towards us, all I could think of is, this is truly a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. I mean, despite of everything going on, he slowed down, saluted the crew chief, boarded the aircraft, and then came up and came up in the cockpit. And normally he would shake hands and say hello, ask about the weather. He just grabbed us on the shoulders and, come on, boys, we got to go. We got to get back to the White House now.
It was near dusk as the helicopter lifted off, surrounded by security.
2 of our Blackhawks were low in front of us. Then you had the flight of H-3s, and we had 53s up as well, filled with a small army of Secret Service agents.
Usually I can hear, I can hear people moving around, I can hear people talking. He was a Secret Service agent, they'd talk back and forth. It was just dead silent.
As we hit the Washington Monument, we turned the helicopter towards Final, and there, right off the left side, was the Pentagon. And it was still fully involved with flame. The roof was still on fire.
Smoke was coming out of the Pentagon. The chopper was very quiet. The president said, take a look. You're looking at the face of war in the 21st century. He knew right from the beginning we were in a war, and it was a different kind of war that would require a lot of our country. It would be fought in a different way.
Coming into the South Lawn, it was kind of eerie because normally there's hundreds of public there on the side to receive him. And on that day, there was nobody. There wasn't a soul. And we landed. He still came up and thanked us, for the safe flight in, and stepped off the steps and into history.
9 hours after the attacks, Mr. Bush arrived back at the White House.
Was there a time that you were afraid there would not be a White House to return to?
I don't remember thinking about whether or not the White House would have been obliterated. I think I might have thought they took their best shot, and now it's time for ours to take our best shot.
As the president went to work inside the executive offices, members of the House and Senate were gathering on the Capitol steps to address the nation.
We are here to declare that our resolve has not been weakened by these horrific and cowardly acts. Congress will convene tomorrow.
There was a moment of silent remembrance for the day's still uncounted dead. And then the group broke into a spontaneous version of God Bless America.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Inside the White House, President Bush was working on his speech with Karen Hughes and her staff.
As we worked on speeches later, we looked back, and as I looked at my notes from that day, realized how many of the themes that he would return to over the next weeks, really, he instinctively hit on that very first day.
Just off the Oval Office, Mr. Bush added the words that would become known as the Bush Doctrine. No distinction between terrorists and those who harbor them.
The president had basically said to them, I'm tired of hearing threat after threat after threat. I want a comprehensive strategy. I want to think through, a comprehensive way to deal. The terror network was basically a parasite operating off the host government in Afghanistan. And so I think both Condi in the policy points and the president felt that it was very important initially to set that tone for the world, to let people know. It was the beginning of what he said later, which is you're either with us or you're against us. You have a choice to make.
The staff urged him to add a declaration of war, but Mr. Bush didn't think the American people wanted to hear it that night.
I told him I didn't want to talk about war in this speech. This was a speech of healing. I want a declaration of war. There's plenty of time to declare our intentions, that I wanted to comfort the country. And so the speech was an attempt to do that. And the next day I started talking about war.
The president spoke to the nation from the same desk where Franklin Roosevelt first heard the news of Pearl Harbor. Now he was commander-in-chief. 80 million Americans were watching.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
The Oval Office speech came at the end of the bloodiest day in American history since the Civil War. Mr. Bush walked to the residence for the night, but the fear of terror continued. At 11:30, a Secret Service agent rushed the president and the First Lady down to the White House bunker. They were tracking an unidentified plane. It turned out to be one of ours, now protecting Washington. In the early morning hours of September the 12th, the president finally slept. September 11th had been the worst day of George W. Bush's presidency. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center destroyed. The Pentagon attacked. Air Force One, where he spent most of the day, covered by a fighter escort. At the time, Mr. Bush had been president for less than 8 months, and he had never been tested as commander-in-chief. No one in the White House or at the Pentagon could be sure of what he would do.
I think they're all probably taking a step back and saying, is this guy going to lead us? I never asked them what they thought, because I knew what I was going to do. I knew exactly what had to be done, Scott, and that was to set a strategy to seek justice, find out who did it, hunt them down, and bring them to justice.
By September the 12th, the commander-in-chief was on active duty.
I remember going in for our morning meeting that I have with him, and I was all worried about the first time he'd see the press, and there was going to be a cabinet meeting, and we needed to have a statement, and he stopped me. And he said, wait, let's talk about the big picture for a minute. A faceless enemy has declared war on the United States of America. We're at war, and this is a different kind of war, and we've got to think about how to start the process of educating about what we were up against and the new kind of enemy that we were facing.
And preparing this country for war.
And preparing the country for war.
The president gathered the National Security Council in the White House Cabinet Room and laid out its mission.
And then it was the president telling his team that this is our moment, that this is why we're here, this is what we will be defined by, and it's the priority of this administration for every day that we're here to win this war.
Then, the president made clear to the American people what was next.
The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war. The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced. This is an enemy that tries to hide, but it won't be able to hide forever. The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world. We will be patient, we'll be focused, and we will be steadfast in our determination. This battle will take time and resolve, but make no mistake about it, we will win.
Mr. Bush gathered his war cabinet to talk about who was behind the attacks. It was just the key decision makers. Secretary of State Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, CIA Director Tenet, the National Security Advisor Dr. Rice, and Vice President Cheney.
Osama bin Laden had launched the attack on the USS Cole in 2000 at the East African embassies in 1998. As we looked at those events on the 11th and then on the 12th, it increasingly occurred to us, looked to us like this had been such an attack.
It wasn't a total surprise. National Security Advisor Rice says the administration had been at work on a plan to strike bin Laden's organization well before September 11th.
I understand that that plan was moving along and was just about ready for presentation to the president.
Literally headed to the president's desk, I think, on the 10th or 11th of September.
The president and his cabinet began to debate the full range of options for waging war.
As I went into over to the White House and entered the Situation Room, it was a very somber group that was gathered there, needless to say. I had one great concern as I walked in that day, and that was that we might want to too quickly default to a military option. And I knew that a military option alone would not be effective against a terrorist organization, that we were going to have to use all the tools of our national power, our diplomatic, economic, political, information, as well as the military, if we were going to defeat a terrorist group like Al-Qaeda.
That is already what Mr. Bush had been thinking.
He made a decision fairly early on that as part of this whole process, for example, that we didn't want just a symbolic cruise missile strike on some training camp in Afghanistan.
Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld early on discussed the idea of making sure we have what's called boots on the ground. If you're going to go to war, that you got to go to war with all your assets. And I agreed completely with him.
But Mr. Bush had some reservations early on.
My biggest concern was that we fight and win a guerrilla war with conventional means. I was very aware of the fact that Russia had gotten bogged down in Afghanistan. sure that as we thought through how we were going to win this war, that we be very thoughtful and very deliberative and match our assets to the conditions on the ground.
A solution to the problem came not as might be expected from the military, but from the CIA. Director Tennant suggested sharing American technology and intelligence with the battle-hardened Afghan fighters hostile to the Taliban government.
The agency had relationships with a lot of these elements, the warlords, the leaders of the Northern Alliance and the Taliban. And the ability to work together using our intelligence assets as well as our new technologies.
It was unconventional because it was an unconventional situation. As I like to describe it to my friends, we had on the ground a fourth world army riding horses and living in tents with some CIA and special forces with them. And we had a first world Air Force, the best in the world. How do you connect it all?
That's what the president wanted to know. He gave his war cabinet 2 more days to come up with a plan.
So I wanted to make sure that the plans that we had to execute the war, this part of the war, on this battleground, the plans were well thought out, and that so we didn't want to rush into it, and I want to make sure we looked at all angles, and we did.
And one of those angles was the need to gather as many allies around the world as possible.
I discussed the idea of putting a vast coalition together. The Secretary of State was anxious to do that. We saw opportunity to work with Pakistan in a new way.
It was clear that Pakistan was key to it because, one, Pakistan would give us bases and access. Pakistan had been a supporter of the Taliban, and Pakistan had tolerated that situation. So within 24 hours, we were drawing up conditions that we felt Pakistan had to meet in order for them to be a part of this coalition.
In all, the U.S. laid down 7 conditions for Pakistan.
I called President Musharraf and told him we needed an answer, and he communicated back a few hours later that they would meet all 7 conditions.
Key decision the president made was that he could rely on Musharraf, that he'd be an effective partner going forward, and that certainly proved to be the case.
And another issue that came up early in the planning was whether the United States should strike Iraq as part of the first response.
There were some who indicated that they thought that the Iraqis had in fact been involved in this. They had to have been involved in it. And therefore, as a part of our general attack against terrorism, that we ought to include Iraq as one of the foes, so to speak, in this operation. The president, not seeing any linkage between the Iraqis and the Al-Qaeda attack on the United States, very firmly put down those suggestions early on.
Final analysis, the decision was made to focus on Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda organization.
And why focus on Afghanistan only? Why narrow the focus?
Well, that was the immediate problem.
In this instance, we had to respond to the direct attack. And that direct attack came to us from Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, with the connivance of the Taliban. And that's what we focused on. And the president realized we have to do this first, respond to this first, and then we can see where else we should act, whether it's against Iraq, whether it's against other forms of terrorism, other terrorist organizations that meant us no good or meant friends of ours no good.
This TLC program is sponsored in part by Bola Wines of Italy. Open up.
In Italy, we savor each meal and take twice as long to finish. We use both hands to speak. We always have 2 glasses of wine. We kiss everyone on 2 cheeks. Why? In the time others live one life, we will ever live to. Bolla Wines of Italy. Open up.
Hey, we're here to find out how people use Sharpie, their favorite permanent marker. So, using your Sharpie to mark wood there, Bob?
My name's Dave.
So, how do you use your Sharpie?
James Bond knows exactly how he likes things to be done. The setup of his car. The equipment he uses. His vodka martini. Shaken, not stirred. And which setting he prefers on his Norelco Spectra. And James Bond always gets what he wants. The new Norelco Spectra. Bond's razor of choice. Set for comfort.
Beauty and the Beast continues in an enchanting holiday sequel. Bring home the music and the magic.
Merry Christmas.
Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas. Own it on Disney DVD and video today.
Look, Toby, the PetSmart Holiday Village. They've got the perfect gift just for you, Toby. More presents for Toby. Whatever you want, Toby. Toby.
Once your pet's been to the PetSmart Holiday Village, it's all he'll ever dream about.
Toby, wake up. Guess where we're going again?
The PetSmart Holiday Village.
It's all for you, Toby.
Trading Spaces goes southwest for a cattle country cleanup. But will Doug's team lift his bedroom blues?
What is a Doug color?
And can Lori clear the kid clutter and create a hip home office?
I like modern.
Then two sisters make a 2-day exchange for change.
All right, let's go.
But will Vern's design have them seeing red?
Thank you, officer.
And can Ty get things back under control? It's back-to-back decorating dilemmas on Trading Spaces. It all starts Saturday at 8 on TLC.
Welcome to Full Metal Challenge.
It's the ultimate hot rod rodeo.
Challengers, start your engines. From the shores of Metropolis to the halls of Tenpin, 3 teams from around the world will answer the call to slug it out in 4 insanely fiendish events. Crank it up as this week's contenders put the pedal to the metal, fire up those homemade cars, and fight to the automotive death. Full Metal Challenge, Sunday and Wednesday at 10, only on TLC.
Hollywood's most ruthless producer
Open the gate, you!
stole Jason Shepard's idea for a movie.
Play by our own rule.
Now,
It's payback time.
2 friends will make one man's life
Color dye?
You really think it's gonna work?
a living nightmare.
Can I take a message? Mr. Wolf is about to go into a meeting.
Frankie Muniz, Amanda Bynes, and Paul Giamatti.
Hey, Marty, I like your new coloring. It works for you.
Big Fat Liar, rated PG.
When you have money problems, just going to the mailbox can be frightening. It's the same when the phone rings. You know it's another creditor. I thought bankruptcy was the only way out. Then I called Ameridebt.
Every day, Ameridebt helps more people with money problems. We're a nonprofit organization offering free consultations to consumers seeking to eliminate their debt.
Now my balances are dropping, and I only have one small monthly payment.
Call this number regardless of your situation. Ameridebt, helping America get out of debt.
On the afternoon of September 12th, the president paid his first visit to the new battleground, the Pentagon. 184 lives had been lost in the attack here. One side of the building that symbolized American military might lay in ruins.
It was so painful to look at that hole, that gaping hole in the side of the building, and I remember a couple of the rescuers just in tears saying you wouldn't believe what it was like in there.
It was a tough time because while we were there, they were still bringing bodies out. They had rescue teams who were uncovering the bodies, and then the morgue team would bring them out.
Before Mr. Bush left, he made a point of speaking with the team recovering remains of the first casualties of war on his watch.
He tried to make them feel that he understood how tough what they were going through was, and you know, he was obviously trying to lift people's spirits, and it did.
At the same time, while we were there, I remember a great inspirational moment when a group of firemen up on the roof of the Pentagon unfurled a flag down the side. It was an act of almost defiance and pride in our country.
Coming here makes me sad on the one hand. It also makes me angry. And our country will, however, not be cowed by terrorists.
In New York, hope was giving way to grim reality. Hundreds of firemen, doctors, paramedics, ironworkers were all pulling at the mountain of debris, but finding no signs of life.
We got a couple of Port Authority cops alive.
Right, last night?
Last night, this morning. Suppose they were like on the 80th floor from what we heard, but that's it so far.
Hour by hour, reinforcements from other states rolled in to join the search. Thousands donated blood and volunteered their time. Troops from the Army Reserve secured the entire lower end of Manhattan, so a crime scene investigation could begin. As the search for survivors continued, workers discovered the tip of a mast used for television transmissions. The day before, it stood on top of Tower Number 1. Now it was planted in a mound of rubble at ground level. Late in the afternoon, a policeman carried an American flag to the mast. Firefighters wept as the stars and stripes flew in the smoke-filled sky. On Thursday morning, September 13th, the president spoke to New Yorkers by phone.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you all very much for taking my phone call. First of all, I can't tell you how sad I am and America is for the people of New York City and the tri-state area.
In a complete surprise to the White House staff, Mr. Bush promised Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Governor George Pataki that he would come to the city the very next day, a day he declared a national day of prayer and remembrance.
I wish I was visiting under better circumstances.
At the end of the call, the president took some questions from the press.
Could you give us a sense as to what kind of prayers you are thinking and where your heart is for yourself as you...
Well, I don't think about myself right now. I'm a loving guy. And I'm also someone, however, who's got a job to do. And I intend to do it. And this is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
I remember the president did get emotional, possibly the first time publicly, after the teleconference, and you could see that he was getting a little choked up, and I think he was really feeling the pain of a lot of Americans.
The president went back in his private study and I think just gathered his thoughts and his composure, and that was just the beginning of a long day that day.
Mr. Bush had only minutes to compose himself before he had to move on to the Washington Hospital Center.
And he met the head physician there. I'll never forget the doctor greeted the president by saying, "I wish we had more patients." It's just a strange thing for a doctor to say at a hospital he wants more patients, but it was a sign of how few survivors there were from the Pentagon attack.
It was the president's first face-to-face meeting with the casualties of this war, many of them disfigured by burns.
It was some of the saddest things to see a mother standing next to her burned son, whose rescuer was standing at the side of the bed, and the burned son could barely speak to the president, but he mustered a salute in one case. Sad day.
It's just a sobering moment for Laura and me, but I want to again thank the hospital, the docs, the nurses, and of course, again tell the families that the nation prays for those who have been injured during this unbelievable act of terror. Thank you all.
Sad day, very touching, and the president started to personally feel the pain of the people who had lost their lives or were wounded, and of course the trauma of the families.
Returning to the White House, there was another reminder of just how much America had changed in the last 2 days. The Secret Service believed that there was a credible threat that a large truck bomb was headed to the White House.
The director of the Secret Service, Brian Stafford, was standing in the doorway of the Oval Office, and he basically said, "Mr. President, you need to leave. There's been another threat against the White House."
He wasn't real receptive to that recommendation, and he ordered a hamburger and said he was going to stay in the White House that evening, and that's what he did.
This TLC program is sponsored in part by Bank One, inviting you to get the credit card that's right for you.
You've got one. You've probably got more than one. And chances are one of yours is one of ours, because nobody in credit cards gives you Bank One's range of choices. You could use this one to get cash back, this one to fly, this one to show you care. Fact, Bank One gives you over 1,200 choices. Why do we go to all that trouble? Don't you think somebody should?
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
No matter what's going on outdoors, it's a beautiful day indoors with Downy Clean Breeze. Line-dried freshness comes inside when you drop the Downy ball in at the start of the wash. It releases itself in the rinse. Line-dried freshness, weather or not, from Downy Clean Breeze.
Some people will go to any length to get a Papa John's pizza. But for you, it's easy. Introducing the Mammoth Pizza Meal from Papa John's. Get a large one-topping pizza and Papa's chicken strips with a free 2-liter of Coke, all for only $13.99. Plus, get a coupon with purchase for $3 off the Ice Age DVD or video.
Better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's.
Bon appetit!
There are a lot of used cars to choose from, but Honda-certified used cars come with a factory warranty and have passed a rigorous 150-point inspection. So you'll almost never find a Honda put out to pasture.
For a limited time, get special APR financing as low as 4.9% for up to 60 months on all Honda-certified used cars.
We are the Science Channel with new shows, big events. Here's a look at what's coming soon. Take a tour of the future.
I see that we're heading toward the brave new unwired world.
2025. Race to repair our eye on the universe.
We didn't have much margin for error.
Return to Hubble and immerse yourself in the ultimate underwater research lab, Science of the Deep. It's all on the new 24-hour network on digital cable and satellite. Call your local provider now and ask for the Science Channel.
Animal Planet's new reality series takes you to the streets of Detroit, where animal cruelty agents investigate over 4,500 cases each year. Meet the Animal Cops. Whoa! Their job? To uncover the crimes.
This is inhumane. Sooner or later, we're going to stop this.
And protect the victims.
So we're talking about a life here, a heart-beating, blood-pumping life.
Hit the streets of Detroit with Animal Planet's new series, Animal Cops. Monday night at 10, only on Animal Planet.
Trading Spaces goes southwest for a cattle country cleanup. But will Doug's team lift his bedroom blues?
What is a Doug color?
And can Lori clear the kid clutter and create a hip home office?
I like modern.
Then, two sisters make a 2-day exchange for change.
All right, bye.
But will Vern's design have them seeing red?
Thank you, officer.
And can Ty get things back under control? It's back-to-back decorating dilemmas on Trading Spaces. It all starts Saturday at 8 on TLC.
On Friday, September the 14th, the National Day of Prayer and Remembrance, the earth stood still. In Paris, London, Berlin, in cities great and small, in squares and schools, everything stopped for a moment of silence. On this unforgettable day, the Commander-in-Chief would become the country's chief mourner. For Mr. Bush, it would be one of the longest and most difficult days in the aftermath of the attacks. It began with a cabinet meeting in the White House. The president walked in and was taken off guard by applause. It brought tears to his eyes.
We all applauded him for his leadership and for the challenge he was facing and for the marvelous way in which he had been speaking to the nation and calming the nation down and conveying strength of purpose and determination. And so we applauded him for that, and he sat down and slightly overcome for a moment, but then he recaptured it.
But the Secretary of State was worried that Mr. Bush might have trouble making it through his speech at the memorial service later that morning.
And I just scribbled a little note to him, and I said, Mr. President, I've learned over the years that when you're going to give a very emotional speech, watch out for certain words that will cause you to, start to tear up. And he looked at me and he smiled. And then at the next break in the conversation, he says, Secretary of State just told me not to break down at the memorial service. And that broke the tension. Everybody started laughing. I felt embarrassed. But he's kidded me about it ever since because he knows it's the truth.
The memorial service at the National Cathedral was the president's idea, but it was the president's wife who helped plan the details.
I wanted it to be dignified. I wanted the psalms and everything that was read to be comforting, because I think we were a country that needed, every one of us needed comforting.
We are here in the middle hour of our grief. So many have suffered so great a loss, and today we express our nation's sorrow.
I was amazed that he was able to get through the speech without weeping, and his sister was there with us.
We come before God to pray for the missing and the dead, and for those who love them.
When he looks at her, they both weep at the drop of a hat. I think there actually was I would call it more a sense of deliberateness and a sense of resolve.
This nation is peaceful, but fierce when stirred to anger. This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
As we stood to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, you could feel the entire congregation, and I could certainly feel myself, stiffen, the kind of spine. And this deep sadness was being replaced by resolve. We all felt that we still had mourning to do for our countrymen who had been lost, but that we also had a new purpose in not just avenging what had happened to them, but making certain that the world was eventually going to be safe from this kind of attack.
After the service, the president moved on to Ground Zero, where hundreds of volunteers were searching through the rubble in the rain, not knowing that the last survivor had been found 2 days before.
You couldn't brief anybody on Ground Zero till you saw it. It was ghostly. Feel like you're having a bad dream. And you're walking through the dream.
Mr. Bush's visit to the city would begin and end in tears of gratitude for his decision to come.
And we stopped at the, I think it was the New York Fire Department command post tent, and went in.
Appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
And it was interesting, as there were some very senior chiefs, fire department chiefs in that tent. And when they looked up and saw the president, they just dissolved into tears.
Mr. Bush had been in New York just a few weeks before. He stopped for a picture with the firemen who always stood by whenever the president's helicopter landed there. Now, 5 of the men in the picture were dead, lost at Ground Zero.
America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn.
There was tears, there was anger. These men and women reflected the mood of the country. And there they started to chant USA.
USA! 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 USA!
And there was a lot of bloodlust. People were, you know, pointing their big old hands at me saying, "Don't you ever forget this, Mr. President. Don't let us down." And the scene was very powerful, very powerful.
Mr. Bush tried to speak, but they kept shouting, "We can't hear you."
I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
And those 3 sentences, that described the man I've worked for all these years better than anything I could have ever written or anybody could have ever written for him. And it was totally from just his gut.
How are you all?
The president had found his voice. The American people heard him. In the days that followed, a new patriotism swept the nation, united behind its commander-in-chief. Flags appeared everywhere. But on this day of cheers and tears, the president had yet to face the saddest duty of all, comforting the families who were now the victims of America's new war.
This TLC program is sponsored in part by Chrysler. Drive equals love.
You cannot do it by yourself. You need to tap into the power of the club.
The Chrysler Town & Country LX, with an available rear seat DVD player and built-in cooler console. So now, going out isn't nearly as exciting as staying in.
What are you doing? Nothing.
Chrysler Town & Country, the ultimate minivan.
You need the power of the club.
Get a leather trim seating credit of up to $16.70 on LXI and limited models.
The world's only personalized razor with 9 adjustable comfort settings. New Norelco Spectrum. Set it for comfort.
Oh, there's no place like home.
Lowe's brings home improvement home for the holidays. Lowe's has 250 brand name appliances in stock. Take one home today or we'll deliver it tomorrow. We'll even haul your old one away for free. Use your Lowe's card and pay nothing for 6 months. And Lowe's has low prices every day, guaranteed. That's our promise.
For the holidays, you can't beat home, sweet home.
Lowe's, improving home improvement.
Let's get that home equity loan.
It's the Hendersons.
Get him a great deal.
Want banks to compete over you? Come to LendingTree.com. Fill out one form and get up to 4 offers within hours. When banks compete, you win at LendingTree.com.
So, Vanessa, like my new phone? Sleek, huh?
Yeah, Ving, it's different.
All the latest features and big buttons.
Yeah, Ving, but don't you think it's kind of...
Did I mention big buttons?
He loves his big phone, and you'll love our big Motorola deals. At Radio Shack, get the Motorola V120C for just $9.99 with activation, regularly $19.99. While you're at Radio Shack, cast your vote for your favorite NFL All-Stars. Radio Shack, you've got questions, we've got answers.
On the next all-new Junkyard Wars. Yeah! It's a choo-choo challenge as the teams root through the rubbish to build railroad racers.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're gonna let us go practice tonight, right?
But which team will have the one-track mind to scheme ahead? And who will be derailed? Let the trains begin on an all-new Junkyard Wars, Wednesday at 9 on TLC.
Animal Planet's new reality series takes you to the streets of Detroit, where animal cruelty agents investigate over 4,500 cases each year. Meet the Animal Cops. Whoa! Their job? To uncover the crimes.
This is inhumane. Sooner or later, we're going to stop this.
And protect the victims.
So we're talking about a life here, a heart-beating, blood-pumping life.
Hit the streets of Detroit with Animal Planet's new series, Animal Cops. Monday night at 10, only on Animal Planet.
With $25,000, you can afford to get a little crazy. You know, do things you ordinarily wouldn't do. Pay online, and you're automatically entered in the DishNetwork.com sweepstakes. If you win, you'll love finding things to do with $25,000, and you'll love how easy it is to pay your Dish Network bill online. Will you marry me? You don't have to go that far. Pay online this month. Heck, every month. And you could be living the good life with the DishNetwork.com sweepstakes.
Hey, ladies, Wednesday nights for you.
There's something I want you to do.
Uncle Stretch. 2 scrumptious dads.
Someone report a fire, ma'am.
That'll make you laugh.
Couldn't believe a woman as beautiful as you would be with a guy like me. Thought you had to stay with me a month to win a bet.
It's Damon.
Coming, dear.
And George.
Hello, ladies.
A couple of delicious dads.
And you just be my baby, that's all.
Catch Ladies Night Wednesday starting at 8/7 Central on ABC.
When the president arrived in New York 3 days after the Twin Towers turned to dust, Manhattan was papered with the faces of the lost. Families held on to the hope that their loved ones were only missing. Unable to believe that so many had vanished in an instant. It was a place where a child comforted a grieving mother. These were the families Mr. Bush would meet next. Several hundred in a convention hall, a meeting the public never saw.
People said to me, he'll come out, don't worry, Mr. President. We'll see him soon. I know my loved one. He'll find a place to survive underneath the rubble and we'll get him out. I, on the other hand, had been briefed about the realities, and my job was to hug and to cry. But I remember the whole time thinking, this is incredibly sad because the loved ones won't come out.
I remember specifically one little boy that just came up and
hugged him and was just bawling. And he had his head buried in the president's stomach. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, 12 years old maybe. And his father, I believe, was behind him. I think that his mother was lost in the wreckage. And images like that won't leave you.
I remember when the advance team was rushing the president to say, we've got to move on, we've got to move on. And the president saying, no, this is where I'm supposed to be and I will stay here. And he did until he touched every single person.
The president was scheduled to be with the families for about 30 minutes. He stayed for 2.5 hours. In just one of hundreds of poignant moments, a boy asked the president to sign a picture of his father, dressed in his firefighter's uniform.
When they started to get me to sign the picture, I said, your daddy won't believe that I was here, so you show him that autograph. Just trying to provide a little hope.
But holding the autographed picture, the boy burst into tears.
It was tough, you know. I still get emotional thinking about it because we're dealing with people who loved their dads or loved their mom, loved their wives who loved their husbands. It was a tough time. You know, and it was a tough time for all of us because we were very emotional, and I was emotional at times. I felt the same now as I did then, which was sad, and I still feel sad for those who grieve for their families. But as I said, out of my tears, I see opportunity.
Among those he remembers well is Arlene Howard. Her son, George, was one of the first to be found at Ground Zero.
And I called the police department, and they said he hadn't called in for roll call and to call back in an hour. And I said, no, I don't need to call back. If he hadn't called in, I knew where he was.
You knew where he was?
I figured he was up in heaven by then.
George Howard had rescued children trapped in an elevator back when the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993. He'd been off duty that day, and he was off duty on September 11th, but he couldn't stay away. The police department gave his badge to his mother, and she gave it to the president.
He leaned over to talk to me and extend his sympathy to me, and that's when I asked him, I'd like to present George's shield to him in honor of all the men and women that were killed over there.
I had to leave the room several times. It was just the weight of the emotion in that room was unbearable almost. And yet by the time the president left, the atmosphere had visibly lightened. I mean, I think he was able to bring some measure of comfort to the families. And when we left New York that night, it was dark. And it's still hard for me to talk about this. The motorcade drove down 42nd Street, and there were thousands of candles. And people were holding the candles up and shouting, God bless you, Mr. President, God bless America, we're praying for you. And it was just an unbelievable experience to imagine in New York City, of all places, where, you know, just the outpouring, it was just incredible.
And we drive by the billboard at Times Square, which is going around with a sign saying, Bush calls up 50,000 reservists. And the day that began at the National Cathedral with the playing of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, that ended going down 42nd Street, Bush calls up 50,000 reservists. After all the sadness and the hugging and the love and the families, you could just feel the winds of war were blowing. And that's how we left New York.
By the end of that day, Mr. Bush flew to Camp David visibly drained.
He was physically exhausted, he was mentally exhausted, he was emotionally exhausted, he was spiritually exhausted.
It was a very, as you can well imagine, emotional day for all of us. Not just coming to the end of the first week, but realizing the challenges that lay ahead. And especially those of us who are going to Camp David, collecting our thoughts for what was going to be a momentous meeting at Camp David the next day.
Very pleased with the response we've been getting from the international community.
The next day, Saturday, September the 15th, he would meet members of the War Cabinet at the presidential retreat for a last decisive meeting.
Every Sunday, without fail, the family gets together for dinner and a little wine. We have been doing it forever, and no one seems to tire of it. How could we, my Mario says to me. Sunday dinner and a little wine is how the family began.
Bolla Wines of Italy. Open up.
Stamps. At supermarkets. Stamps. By phone. Stamps. Online. Stamps. At ATMs. Along with your local post office, wherever you find this symbol, you'll find stamps. Conveniently located. Brought to you by the United States Postal Service.
If these walls could talk, they'd say use the new straight line laser level. Just level, set, fire, and get everything laser straight. Straight line, bring your work to a new level.
Your pet's same exact heartworm and flea medications delivered to your home, saving you time and money. 1-800-PET-MEDS. We deliver savings and convenience on HeartGuard, Advantage, Frontline, and all other pet medications. Call to order now or order online.
It seems like all fun and games, but a whole lot can happen while you were out. It's 2 days of covert creativity.
It's a madhouse!
As our design team delivers surprise renovations from boring to beautiful. You can catch the fun, prizes, and surprises on While You Were Out. It all starts right after Trading Spaces. Saturdays at 10, only on TLC.
On the next all-new Junkyard Wars, it's a choo-choo challenge as the teams root through the rubbish to build railroad racers. But which team will steam ahead and who will be derailed? It's an all-new Junkyard Wars, Wednesday at 9 on TLC.
Saturday, September 15th, the War Cabinet gathered at the President's retreat, Camp David, for a final discussion of the plan for going after the terrorists.
I want victory. I want a war plan. My message is for everybody who wears the uniform, get ready. The United States will do what it takes to win this war.
Some aspects of the war plan were already in action.
The coalition was coming together. Colin Powell did a fine job of that. The Secretary of Defense had begun to put into place the planning necessary to have a full-scale military operation to hold the Taliban accountable. The CIA intelligence gathering was honing in, and I was pleased with the progress. On the other hand, I wanted to start clarifying plans.
He was encouraging us to think boldly. He was listening to all ideas. He was not constrained to any one idea. He wanted to hear his advisors talk and argue and debate with each other.
I went around the room and asked everybody what they thought ought to happen.
The military presented options that ranged from minimal to full-scale war.
That option used a combination of tactical Air Force and naval air. It would use cruise missiles and also boots on the ground using our special operations forces initially. And we could do that option either in conjunction with the plan that the CIA had put together or as a separate action altogether.
when you left that meeting on Saturday night, you didn't tell them what you wanted to do.
No, I didn't. I wanted to just think it through. This was, anytime you commit our troops to harm's way, there's a president must make sure that he fully understands all the consequences and ramifications, and I wanted to just spend some time on it alone, and did.
And it was when we got back here to the White House, and we got off the helicopter, and he said, I know what I want to do. And in very, very rapid, almost staccato fashion, he said, I want to issue an ultimatum to the Taliban that tells them give up the Al-Qaeda now or face their fate. I want to use more than just air power. This has got to have, as we came to call it, boots on the ground to show that America is really serious. So I was writing, I thought, we know what we're going to do. We've got a plan, we've got a strategy, and now it's going to be up to us to make this work.
And your last reservations that you had to clear up in your own mind were
Could
what?
we win? I don't want to be putting our troops in there unless I'm certain we could win. And I was certain we could win.
The important thing the president did in this period between 9/11 and Saturday, and then when he spoke to the nation the following Thursday night, was make a decision and communicate that decision to the world, that this was a campaign not just against Al-Qaeda and not just in response to what happened to us, but it was a campaign against all forms of terrorism, against the civilized world.
His resolve was so clear, and the sense that this was not just going to be a pinprick or an effort to avenge this one event, but that he was going to take on these terrorists in a major way, and that this was going to be a global war on terrorism that would be a war against all of those who hated freedoms. It was very clear. It was clear in his eyes, it was clear in his voice, and it's been clear to everybody ever since.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
9 days after the attack on America, as fighter jets circled over the Capitol, the President came before a joint session of Congress to commit the nation to the war on terror.
Tonight we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom.
We all realized that it would probably be the most historic speech of his presidency and of many of our lifetimes. Our nation had been through a terrible attack. We had to define what we were up against. We had to rally the country. We had to rally the world. And he understood the historic importance of the speech.
Each of us will remember what happened that day and to whom it happened. We'll remember the moment the news came, where we were, and what we were doing. Some will remember an image of a fire or a story of rescue. Some will carry memories of a face and a voice gone forever. And I will carry this. It is the police shield of a man named George Howard, who died at the World Trade Center trying to save others. It was given to me by his mom, Arlene, as a proud memorial to her son. It is my reminder of lives that ended and a task that does not end.